all you can and you're running with kings. But how far could you go if you run with the wind? And the chances you take are what give you wings, and you can fly.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Consider Civility. It's my privilege to continue our Civility in the Community series with co-founder of the Civility Center, Kent Roberts. And Kent, today, as you know, we've been talking about community and building civility in the community. And most of our listeners, and myself included, we understand based on some of our past conversations how important it is to have a diverse group at the table. But I have a couple of questions for you today. What would you say are, number one, the top 3 character traits of individuals that would be helpful with civility initiatives, and number 2, the top 3 skills? So we want to differentiate between character and skills that would help push a civility initiative forward.
Well, those are good questions. And if I kind of slide between the two, please just ask clarifying questions, and I'm sure that our listeners will then have a clearer picture of what it is we're trying to say. I think that the number one thing that has to happen when people would sit down at the community table is they have to be really open to all ideas and learning and growing and discovering. And not being closed-minded and have a already a pictured view and a closed view of what they think just needs to happen. And by heavens, this is what we've got to do. So when you come to the community table, you have to come with an open mind and with a learning mind, with the idea to see what we can learn from one another, what we can discover together. And I think that openness is really important. I think that if you come to the table, well, I can't wait to tell you what we need to do, I think we're going to be in trouble. We're not going to get very far. We have to be willing to share. We have to be willing to certainly not compromise principle, but you have to be willing to blend and blend thoughts and come up with, 1 and 1 is now 5, something along those lines. Another important thing I think is that understand that there's actually a moral imperative to why we're there. I mean, why would we not want to get better? In today's society, when we can see what happens when we can become so divisive and so divided within the community where we cannot join together, it really is detrimental to the overall health, not of us individually, but for our children and our families and the workplace. So we've really got to make sure that we have all of that, that we understand we have that imperative that this is really, really important work. And then I think that going along with being open and understanding the importance of the work is re-stressing again the non-judgmental attitude of the work. You cannot put yourself in a position where people can tell when they're being judged. And if people feel like they're being judged, number one, they're not going to share or be as open. We don't get the best possible outcome. So just being able to be free and open and understand the importance of the work to be done. Does that answer the first part of it?
Yes, thank you. Sorry, there's a bit of a delay to put my microphone on. So I just wanted to touch a little bit on this idea of moral imperative, because obviously you, with the work that you've done and you have that mindset. For me as a civility practitioner, I feel like I have that mindset. But would you agree that this, the idea or concept of a moral imperative, that is not something that comes automatically to many people. What can you say about that?
Well, I think you're right. That's why a lot of times when we start a conversation, the why question, why are we here? Why is this work important? Why do we want the community to be better? And when they can start relating it to their families and children and grandchildren and posterity, when they can start talking about their livelihood, when they start talking about safety issues of the community, those types of things, it doesn't take them long before they can get to that imperative. But those clarifying why questions really help, Lou.
Okay, excellent. And then my last comment before we move on to the skills piece is, the why question, the same thing. I would hope that the majority of people would see pretty quickly the benefits of improvement for everyone, and that the moral imperative to be better and do better, to create better and contribute better, all of that. What would you say about, I've read some research about this sort of prevalent pessimism, and that whether it's the news or crises media, there's some influences that encourage some people really to accept negativity or to be pessimistic. And there are people that actually create chaos because they thrive on the energy that chaos creates. And so how do you offset, because we're talking about character and mindset, how do you offset those kind of influences? Because in my world, I find that they're actually pretty strong influences that, if ignored, can really derail the good work that I might be trying to do.
And that is why the work today is harder than it was 10 years ago. Just because of some of that type of attitude has become prevalent. But I think that by acknowledging the fact that that's a choice, that you can wallow in scarcity, but you're going to flourish in abundance. And I think that, I choose abundance over scarcity. I choose hope over fear. So when you start doing the comparisons and the contrast and say, which world would you rather live in, a fearful world or a hopeful world? And that doesn't mean you got to be naive or any of that other stuff. But when we build out of strength, and we build out of hope, and we build out of possibility. So you're talking about the difference between choosing to accept things as the way they are, or trying to do things differently. And I think that, you're really onto the crux here by having these questions explored that we're talking about right now, is going to help people come to the conclusion where they'll see the importance of the work. And there'll be some that'll choose not, that just will not leave and go into possibility. But when it's your livelihood, or when it's your children's safety, are you going to accept, or are you going to try to change? And I think most people, and for those of you that choose change, or choose possibility, or choose hope over fear, this is what we're talking about. What can we build together that will have a stronger possibility of us achieving common goals that we are going to discover together?
All right. And you know what, I just find this whole topic so fascinating, because, as you know, maybe some of our listeners don't know, continuous learning, which relates to being resilient, open-mindedness, kind of seeking to learn as a way of problem solving, this idea of being change ready, to me, all of that ties directly to this concept of choice. You know, that people have a choice. Do I choose hope or fear? Do I choose scarcity or prosperity? And I think it's really kind of interesting how one of the four skills that underpins the ability to choose civility is this concept of choice, continuous learning, change readiness. So it's really fascinating to me how, you know, once you start the conversation, how everything is directly linked to competency, because increasingly I find people are starting to realize that we can talk about world problems. We can talk and talk and talk and talk and talk about what we're going to do, but until which time somebody not only has the commitment, but the competency. You know, that quote, who was it that said, be the change you want to see in the world? I can't remember who said that.
Well, it hasn't been said by one, it's been said by many.
Okay.
But
So,
there is that quote, and it escapes me at the moment too.
yeah,
But
but I hear people say that all the time, be the change, but they forget that to be the change, sometimes I think that phrase should be learn the change you want to be, right? So that, because it's competency. I know lots and lots of people I've been involved in countless projects that everybody talks and talks and talks, but when it comes time to actually doing it, they're not prepared to make the change and do the learning that's required to actually follow through on the conversation.
well, you are so right, Lou. And I think that, you know, as we talk about this, it's really important that folks get this understanding, because you know, if we just start right in with a presentation and we don't get to, generally when I'm working with educators, um, I will not go any farther until they connect to the moral imperative. I figure everything is useless up until that point. And if they can't connect to the idea that the reason we're doing what we're doing, that there is this strong moral imperative, and you connect to it, I don't see the value of us going any farther. And so much of this is all about, as you said, learning and continuous learning. So I think that by asking these questions about what it is that we want people to be open to, and not judgmental about, they'll understand the why we do it in the first place. And that is because it is a choice, and we choose to be proactive instead of just reactive. And we choose to be dealing with possibility instead of just resigning ourselves to the way things are. Um, so, you know, some people will just say, no, I'm not going to go there. And that's fine. But they're probably not builders. And, you know, to build something, you've got to have a vision, and you've got to be able to see the possibilities of what it is that you're trying to do and why it is that you're building what you're building. So when we come to the community table, we got to come with open hearts, open minds, understand the importance of the work, and welcome everyone to the table.
Excellent. Thank you. So I love all that mindset. And I think that that's something we should make into a masterclass. In fact, is developing a civility mindset, because civility and community it's, to me, it also ties to citizenship, which is a topic for another day. But related to this, then, part B of the question, Kent, what 3 skills? So we've been talking a bit about character and mindset, but on top of that, then, related to competency, what 3 skills do you think are critical for successful civility initiatives in the community?
Well, it's the one that I'm not very good at. First one in my mind, and I always do it as number one, and that is listen for understanding. Not just, you know, kind of just listen. No, really listen so that you understand what it is the other person is trying to say. There's a huge difference between listening to concepts, but trying to understand exactly what the person is saying. And all aspects of understanding that and listening in that way it's hard, especially, you know, some of us have so much to say we can't wait to start speaking again, and we rush over the fact that we needed to listen, and we would be able to speak much more effectively if we had listened a little better. So number one, you have to be able to listen for that. The other thing is that it goes to this, you call it empathy or call it whatever you want. There's it's a way of treating people, body language and everything, really following the golden rule and following that. People can smell out, to me, this is a skill set. They've got to make sure that they're not sending signals to the people at the other folks at the table. They got to be very careful of their verbal and nonverbal messages they're sending. It goes back and tied to that openness, but people can sense that, and you will. Kids can, especially kids, they can smell out when someone is really treating them with respect and truly listening to what they have to say, or just going through the motions. It's just something that we really have to work hard. And these skills are hard. You know, you just can't read them and say, okay, I got it. No, you've got to practice and practice and practice, and you've got to get that constant feedback, and you can tell from the body language of the person who is sitting at the table with you, whether or not you are being successful with that. So, geez. So anyway, I hope that phone call didn't interrupt us here, but I'll finish up with this by saying that we've got to speak plainly and simple, and so that we understand each other. We're speaking a common language, and I don't mean English, so to speak. We've talked about this before, but a skill set where we make sure that the language we're using is understood.
Reason why each of us comes to this earth, and your actions will always speak louder than words, and you'll never know what you're capable of until you try.